Ah yes, Street Fighter, one of the most beloved franchises in gaming history, a series where competition thrives, rivalries are born, and skill is everything. But there is something about Street Fighter, and other modern fighting games for that matter, that feels different. Something insidious. Something lurking beneath the surface that people, in my opinion, aren't talking about enough. A slow, deliberate shift that many people have accepted without question. So, join me today as we pull back the curtain on Street Fighter VI's darkest secret, a shift in the way fighting games are made and sold, one that has quietly rewritten the rules of the genre, a transformation so profound that it has altered not just Street Fighter, but the entire fighting game industry itself. And yet, despite all of the flashy trailers, hyped up announcements, and promises of innovation, this change hasn't been for the benefit of players, quite the opposite. A carefully crafted system that has been designed not to reward players or dedication, but to keep you spending. This is no longer about mastery or dedication, it's about keeping you hooked. A carefully designed system engineered to turn engagement into spending, to break apart what was once a complete experience and sell it back to you piece by overpriced piece. This isn't just a new era of Street Fighter, this is a new era of control, where developers dictate the terms and us players are left chasing an experience that we once expected. So with that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. Let's talk about the dark direction of Street Fighter, uncover the truth about modern fighting games, and expose exactly why you should be very, very concerned. It's well known that in the 90s, Capcom took full advantage of Street Fighter 2's popularity, releasing numerous versions, updates and spin-offs to ensure that fans kept spending money on what was essentially the same core experience. In fact, we had multiple editions of the same game. Street Fighter 2 wasn't just Street Fighter 2, we had Champion Edition, Turbo, Super, and Super Turbo, each one added new mechanics, characters, and balance changes. That's not all, later we saw games like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, Ultra Street Fighter 4, and even Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, all re-releases of existing games. But in my opinion, none of this is as shameless as what is happening today. What's really cool is that by using my affiliate links, you can get a massive 78% off of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, huge discounts on all modern fighting games, as well as big money off of thousands of other titles too. Make some huge savings and support my work simultaneously. Happy shopping and enjoy the rest of this video. Speaking of games like the multiple editions of Street Fighter 2 we just touched on, here's the crucial difference. Back then, when you bought the latest version of a fighting game, you were getting the definitive version of that game at that time. Everything balanced, complete, and packaged as a full experience. Street Fighter 6, however, has taken a completely different approach. Instead of a full one-time purchase for an updated experience, Capcom has turned Street Fighter into a slow-drip monetization machine, locking content behind battle passes, microtransactions, and time-limited purchases. And the worst part? They've tricked players into thinking this is all completely normal. Now, some might ignorantly argue, but Top Hat Gaming Man, isn't this just like the old days of multiple editions? What's the difference? Well, the difference is in the business model. When Capcom released Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo back in 1994, Capcom weren't intentionally trying to drip feed content over the years. Instead, they were iterating on their flagship fighting game in response to arcade trends, player feedback, and technological advancements. Capcom's focus was on refining the gameplay experience and keeping arcades competitive, not deliberately and predatorily stretching out content to extract maximum value from consumers over time. Each new edition of Street Fighter 2 was a full package at launch, rather than a base game designed to be slowly pieced together with paid updates. Today, Street Fighter 6's model is the exact opposite. It's a live service game disguised as a premium product, which you have to pay full retail price for anyway. Instead of releasing a finished, complete edition, Capcom gates content behind seasonal updates, ensuring that if you want the full experience, you're constantly investing time and money into the game. The difference between now and then is night and day, so let's break it down further. Back then, with the fighting game genre, you bought a game, played it, and sometimes unlocked more content through skill and dedication. If Capcom released an updated version, it was a one-time purchase that expanded the game significantly, with there seemingly never been an original intention to do such a thing. Now though, you buy the game, but despite the content existing, you don't have access to everything. If you want classic costumes, premium colors, and additional content, you need to grind the battle pass or spend real money. And what makes this all the more disgusting is that instead of paying once for an upgrade, you're expected to keep paying indefinitely. And let's talk about the real kicker here, the classic costumes. In older Street Fighter titles, you simply had alternate color palettes for free, or you unlocked outfits through gameplay. But now, Capcom has taken nostalgia itself and turned it into a product, selling Street Fighter II era outfits piecemeal through microtransactions and battle passes. Even if you already paid full price for the game, you still have to keep spending to get the things that once upon a time would have been standard. This is absolutely disgusting because it represents the worst kind of corporate greed, taking something that was once a fundamental part of the gaming experience and locking it behind the paywall just because they can. Nostalgia isn't just a marketing gimmick, it's a genuine connection players have with a franchise they've supported for decades. Yet instead of respecting that, Capcom exploits it, dangling Street Fighter II era costumes in front of longtime fans and charging them extra for what should have been included from the start. It's cynical, it's manipulative, and it proves that modern AAA publishers have no shame in gutting their own games just to nickel and dime their most loyal customers. The idea that players are expected to not only pay full price for the game, but then continuously fork out more money for basic, historically free content is an insult to anyone who remembers when unlocking costumes was a reward, not a financial transaction. It's crazy that this is even remotely tolerated. So how on earth has Capcom managed to train its players to accept such shameless practices? Well, if we take a quick trip through time, it becomes clear to see that this didn't happen overnight. That would be preposterous. Instead, this was a slow, calculated process, one that Capcom has been perfecting over multiple generations. Essentially, they have groomed you. Street Fighter IV is where the conditioning began. The introduction of paid DLC costumes might have seemed harmless at first, just a fun extra for those willing to spend a little more. But what it really did was lay the groundwork for normalizing the idea that alternate costumes, something once unlocked through gameplay, were now a premium feature. Capcom was testing the water, and players for the most part naively accepted it. But it would be Street Fighter V where the true shift happened. The game launched with a clear live service framework, dressed up with a free in-game currency system that gave the illusion that players could unlock characters and content just by playing. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The grind required to earn enough fight money for meaningful content was absurd, pushing more and more players towards simply opening their wallets. As time went on, updates and expansions further leaned into monetization, and by the time the Champion Edition rolled out, it was clear that Capcom had fully embraced the idea of intentionally releasing an incomplete game and charging players over time to finish it. As of today with Street Fighter VI, now the floodgates are wide open. Capcom has fully committed to the live service model, layering in every downright dirty and despicable modern monetization trick in the book. Battle passes ensure players feel obligated to log in regularly or miss out on limited time content. Classic costumes, once a simple bonus, are now locked behind microtransactions. The in-game store is stuffed with premium cosmetics, and the character roadmap has been designed to keep players continuously spending for years to come. The idea of a Street Fighter game being a complete package at launch is now a relic of the past. Instead, Capcom has fully transformed the series into a long-term financial commitment, treating its players less like fans and more like perpetual revenue streams. This is no accident. Capcom has spent the last decade slowly training the player base to accept this new way of selling fighting games. The ultimate goal? To replace the old model of one-time purchases with never-ending cycles of monetization. You are the cows and they are the farmers, milking every penny they can while convincing you that this is just the natural order of things, even though it is completely freaking ridiculous. But let's talk about the biggest lie of all surrounding Street Fighter VI. That is a complete game at launch. Yes, compared to Street Fighter V's disastrous launch, Street Fighter VI came out in a better state. But was it truly complete? Well, of course freaking not, and suggesting otherwise would be lying to ourselves. After all, the first wave of DLC fighters was originally leaked at the same time as the base roster, so we know this was all the plan from the start. But what I will say is that Street Fighter VI's dark secret isn't just about its monetization, it's about what it represents. The fact that we are never going back to the way things were. Fighting games are no longer one-time purchases with unlockable content and full experiences. Instead, they are now live service products designed to keep you spending indefinitely. And the real tragedy? Most players have already accepted this as normal. This is the new standard for fighting games. Capcom has carefully, methodically, and deliberately shifted the model from selling complete editions to selling fragments of a game over time. And now that appears to be working, do you really think they'll ever go back? Will we ever see another fighting game that just lets you buy it once and have everything? Or is the genre doomed to be a glorified subscription service forever? These are incredibly sad questions worthy of pondering. But if we do desire change, is there anything we can actually do about it? Well, if we want to fight back against Capcom's monetization model in Street Fighter 6, and the trends of live service fighting games in general, we have to think strategically. Companies don't just stop bad practices out of goodwill. They stop when they realise they're losing money or goodwill in ways that actually hurt their bottom line. So here's how we can push back if we truly wanted to. Number 1, stop buying freaking DLC and battle passes. This is the most obvious, but also the most effective method. Companies track engagement with monetized content. If battle passes, premium costumes, and microtransactions aren't selling, they will rethink their approach. Remember, Capcom isn't just looking at how many people are playing Street Fighter 6, they're looking at how many people are spending money on it. If enough players ignore the battle pass and microtransactions, Capcom will have to pivot. Something else we could do is demand a Super or Ultra Edition instead of a live service model. After all, we have to remember that back in the Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4 days, Capcom would release definitive editions of their games instead of nickel and diming players. If enough players demand a single full-priced edition with all content included, Capcom might bring back the old model. Fighting games like Guilty Gear Strive, for example, still offer full season pass bundles, which is a better alternative than endless microtransactions. If players make it clear that they prefer paying once rather than endlessly, it could influence future releases. We also need to refuse to engage with FOMO content. One of Capcom's most underhanded tactics is using limited time content to pressure players into spending money. Some content is designed to make you think, if I don't buy this now, I'll never get it. The best way to fight back? Ignore it completely. If players refuse to fall for these tricks, Capcom might rethink their time-sensitive monetization that are currently designed for maximum manipulation. Further to this, efforts need to be made to support alternative fighting games that don't exploit players to the same degree. If we want Capcom to change, we have to show them that better business models exist. Instead of supporting Street Fighter 6's monetization, players can put their money into games that offer fairer pricing. Guilty Gear Strive, as mentioned, has season passes but no battle pass nonsense, and Melty Blood type Lumina gets free updates and has no microtransactions. Wow. If these games succeeded while Street Fighter 6 struggles with monetization backlash, Capcom would take notice. For progress to actually be made, all of this would need to be made a talking point, meaning big content creators and revered fighting game community members would need to begin calling it out, rather than instead spending most of their time shilling for Capcom. Let's be honest, Capcom has gotten away with this because not enough people are complaining.
I'd like to make a complaint, please.
Don't care.
Right now, the focus is on Street Fighter 6's gameplay, hype around paying them more money for more characters, and not their monetization practices. Content creators, influencers, and even regular players should keep bringing attention to it. If big names in the fighting game community and YouTubers actually started pointing out the predatory nature of Street Fighter more, Capcom would be forced to respond. It's also worth noting that one of Capcom's shadiest tactics is that they never tell players exactly how much they need to spend over time. They release season passes without revealing and showing us all the content, making players commit before they know what they're actually paying for. Due to this, we should be actively pressuring Capcom for full transparency on their future content. In fact, the community needs to be demanding this. After all, if Capcom won't reveal full content plans before releasing stuff, why should any of us continue to buy blindly from them? Unfortunately, I have to be honest. I don't feel there are enough people upset enough about this for anything to actually change. However, I believe if pressure was put on Capcom, they would attempt to address the situation in some way. You have to remember that Capcom has a long history of fixing bad business decisions when backlash is strong enough. Street Fighter V, for example, had a terrible launch, but Capcom eventually reversed course. Resident Evil 3 had controversial cut content. Capcom listened and avoided making the same mistakes with Resident Evil 4 Remake. And the infamous Street Fighter Cross Tekken on-disc DLC scandal forced Capcom to be more cautious with DLC in the future. At least up until recently anyway. If players keep reminding Capcom of their past mistakes and corrections, it would put pressure on them to course correct again. Then they have to make a choice: continue squeezing players for short-term profits, or win back trust and create a game that sells for years based on quality alone. The real question is, will enough people actually push back before it's too late? Well, as I said, I don't think they will. Things are only going to get worse. The harsh reality is most people have far bigger problems in their lives to deal with than thinking about the state of the fighting game industry. Meanwhile, Capcom and other top developers have a dedicated army of radical fanboys and corporate shills, many of whom masquerade as content creators who will parrot whatever PR nonsense they're fed. Nothing will change because at the end of the day, the masses will still ooh and ah over the latest flashy character reveal trailers, completely oblivious to the bigger picture. It's the same cycle every time. A slickly edited trailer drops, people lose their minds, social media floods with hype, and any valid criticism gets buried under a wave of blind enthusiasm. The industry knows exactly how to manipulate its audience, and let's be real, most people are more than happy to be led by the nose. For full transparency, I'm no saint in this situation either. In all honesty, I'm just as guilty as everyone else I'm criticising. After all, I make a full-time living creating content that thrives on fighting game nostalgia, and like clockwork, the views come rolling in anytime I talk about new content being announced. It's the nature of the beast. The cycle feeds itself. Fans eat up the hype, content creators capitalise on it, and the industry keeps pumping out just enough to keep the machine running while sidestepping the real issues. I could sit here and pretend I'm above it all, but let's be real, I'm right there in the mix. The difference is, at least I'm willing to acknowledge this, while most are too busy waving their pom-poms for whatever scraps the industry throws their way. Still, if you want to support someone who is openly a bit morally grey, such as myself, like and unsubscribing always helps, but don't forget that by using my affiliate links, you can get a massive 78% off of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, huge discounts on all modern fighting games for that matter, as well as big money off of thousands of other titles too. Make some huge savings and support my work simultaneously. Happy shopping and cheerio.